Well, welcome back, baseball fans, to the Carryover League. This is a special video. Is going to be discussing home field advantage and how I've come up with some rules that I use to play my games that are different from the standard rules that Strat-O-Matic has. In an era of card sets that I have from 1969 to 1984, where in 1970 Strat-O-Matic introduced the super advanced game with the platoon cards with each side of the card. Debuted in 1971 was the debut year of that, and then it continued that way through 1984, where they added the E ratings in 1977. During the same year we had the expansion of Seattle and Toronto. And then the next major change would have been in 1985 when they added the ballpark effects and the clutch hitting effects on the cards. So I just like to play and enjoy the super advanced sets from 71 to 84 in my carryover leagues. And then I discovered that the 69 and 70 were also reissued in the early 80s with a similar look and similar format of cards to give a full 16-year experience from 1969 to 1984. That's those 16 years of the cards I use in my various leagues. So I guess the way to start this is that I first experimented with mixed card leagues in the late 90s, and just I had a bunch of incomplete sets of cards from 1976 to 1984, and I just sort of picked and grabbed and players I liked, and didn't really have too much structure other than to make the teams exciting and fun, and it wouldn't even be called a carryover league. It was just a mixed card league. And in playing that early on, I would get a lot of results, playing a lot of games, and start looking at the wins and losses and so forth. And I just kind of discovered that the road team was very successful winning games without any additional structure or additional rules. This is my gameplay, what we're looking at here, that's in the year 2022. There's been various versions of this game player since the 1990s. I think I can pull out an earlier version of it to see how far it has grown, I guess, as far as the change, how much it's changed. For instance, oh boy, this is a pretty gaudy looking thing, isn't it? Look how narrow the innings are. It's almost hard to read in comparison. But yeah, it's gone through a lot of revisions and ideas to help it make it easier for me to see everything I need to see and to make quick decisions. And quick decisions is really what it's about when you're playing a league on your own. You're going to be playing a lot of games, so you want to have some shortcuts and some things that make sense, and then you're saying, well, if you're going to bend the rules or change the rules, can you make it fair for everybody, all the home team and away team? And that has been the challenge over the years. And so I came up with some with the away team winning anywhere between 51 to 53% of the games. Starting to think of this more of simply a game, like a poker game or a chess game, and not really think of it as much as a baseball game. Just a game that is invented. The idea that you could tinker with the rules a bit. And what I always came back to is that the road team always would be the front runner. They would be a team that would grab the lead first, and then they would kind of lean on all the advantages you have when you're leading in a game, and that would be more insurmountable than a traditional game that's played with actual home field advantages. For instance, in traditional Major League Baseball, you've got the home team's in their home city with their home cooking. They sleep in their own bed. Their away team is coming in out of town on a plane, can't sleep, blah, blah, blah. ballpark they don't get, the fans are booing, they don't understand the dimension, all the various elements that can go into a home field advantage. And in a game like this, one of the most outrageous ways to manipulate it, in a way that I quickly took about 10 minutes to think of the idea and then another 30 seconds to throw it in the trash, is the idea of what you see in fantasy leagues, fantasy baseball leagues. Let's for a minute pretend you're in a 9, because I have the 9 innings here. I can just use this as an example. Say you're in a fantasy football league with 9 friends, and you're drafting 1 through 9. Well, in fantasy football, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for the first round, and then it's called the snake. You go back and go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for the second round of the draft. And then you go back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then they even have some advanced leagues with more teams, like a 12-team league, which some players like to do what's called the double snake, which is like 1 to 9, then 9 to 1, 9 to 1, and then 1 to 9, 1 to 9. And from a fantasy football idea, you could just destroy the fun of baseball by attempting to play a game with a snake. In other words, in here we have the Mets and the Phillies. So the Mets lead off in the first, Phillies at the bottom, then the Phillies lead off in the second, then the Mets. Then the Mets in the third, the Phillies in the bottom, and then the Phillies lead off in that inning. And do it this way, right? And so that each team gets a crack to be the first team up in every inning. Well, obviously, that really destroys the fundamentals of baseball, in my opinion. It's a silly idea. Though it could, theoretically, if put into practice, make a more interesting, it would be an interesting experiment to try something like that to see if the winning percentages got closer to a neutral result without an advantage. I'm not one to do that, but I welcome your commentary if anyone's willing to attempt to play a baseball game in that format. I don't recommend it. I think it's a ridiculous, initially it sounds like fun, but then it realizes that it's a different sport other than baseball, I guess, is the best way I can summarize that. So, what I ultimately came up with was a long list of ways to give very small advantages to the home team that affected various elements of the game. Affect the pitcher, the catcher, the base running, the defense, the infield up rules, the base running rules, and general defense. And then I implemented a series of rules in different years, and I came up with a sheet that I lost because I had memorized it and somehow I lost it. So I recreated a new one. And that's what I have here for you. A new list of my home field advantages that I've been using on YouTube for these videos. And I'll just kind of go through one while also remembering that there's a defense double jeopardy that I will have to explain and the only way, by making real-time results. And I'll do that at the end of this. So I'll go through these, and you might see that some are insignificant and some are very significant. But I'll go through each one. So the first one is the E rating of a pitcher. So if a pitcher has an E0 rating, the away pitcher is rolled just like it would normally be rolled. But your home pitcher, if your home team pitcher is an E0, you just instantly call it a GBA. But it eliminates the dice roll of 1 and 2, which would be singles, and also a GBC that's in there. And I'm not even sure it's on 18, 19, and 20. But this does give that slick fielding pitcher who doesn't make errors a big advantage, where it's automatic GBA. This is one that I came up with, and I've been in full force the whole time. I have not had much objection in the games where this has really swayed the overall league performance. And not to repeat myself too much, but again, I play so many games in the league So I'm the home manager, and then with the cities switch. The two teams, for instance, in a series I recently played, the Mets and Phillies, they'll play on each other's home field. In other words, traditional Major League Baseball, your 162 game schedule, you're on a homestand, you're on a road trip. But I actually play best of 3s, 5s, best of 7s, so the Mets and the Phillies are both going to have home advantage at a certain point in this particular series. So they both get to utilize that feature. Now let me get to the catcher. This is also an oversimplification and really simplifying the base stealing rules in general, because this is in an era before you had pitchers holding runners' ratings on, and of course base runners getting their jump. So this is in the early stages, so it's very rudimentary, of course, in this time. So I just make a general rule, regardless whether you're a AAA stealer or a D stealer. And I might want to also add that these ratings are the only ratings that I will steal with. I won't steal a D or a E stealer. And usually I'll only steal a C on a +2 arm catcher, usually. And I'll hold all the A's and B's. That's the general simplistic rule I play, because it's just quick and easy to figure out. And all I'm doing is I'm saying that you get the -2 for your catcher as the away catcher, and I'm giving him the extra 5% to your home catcher for holding the bases, for holding first base. And I don't hold second, and I'll only bring the infield up and holding to prevent the runner from third from scoring. But it's only a 5% difference. And it's kind of uniform and simplistic. And basically, I find that I like to steal bases less than most players would want to steal anyway. I'm not a huge base stealing person, as I prefer the players, the guys just to be held on and the plus to be rolled to advance the runner, to hit a ball through the hole between first and second and advance that runner to third base a lot of the time. I'm not very aggressive in my strategy for that. So with those two for pitcher and catcher, the next two are base runners. And this is about taking the extra base. So this is about constants and variables. This is the constant, and this is the variable. So if you're the third base coach, it's a constant where it says, is it 14 or better? He's gone. He's going to take the chance. He's going first to third. He's going to try and score from second. He's going to do it. And the idea is there are certain situations where you'd like the guy to, be conservative and pump the brakes at third base. I see this as a home field advantage because maybe a runner that would normally be held at third is asked to keep going and gets thrown out at the plate, and that gives the home team an extra out. So this is sort of the third base coach not being as discriminate as the home team coach, and all these players have to roll on the 14 or better, or have to run on the 14 or better. The home team, I manage as every home team. So I manage as the home team, and I'll use my discretion. I'll run on a 13, I'll run on a 10, a 9, 11, or whatever, depending on the situation. So here it's a variable, here it's a constant, as the decision to take that extra base. Another little addendum you could call, this is sort of this rule here, it relates to this rule here. And this was one of my pet peeves. This mostly involved runners, the very elite, fastest guys who end up with an 18 or 19 result to get that extra base, being thrown out on a 20. Or the 18 being thrown out on a 19. The 19 being thrown out on a 20. That 5 or 10% chance. I despised that. I hated that. So, if the result is of success for 18 or 19 exists, if you're the home team, you got it. You aren't in harm's way, you don't roll the dice. You just get that. You get that advance from first to third, or you score. If the result is 18, I don't care, you get it for the home team. The away guy has to always roll. And again, for 17 or less, everybody rolls. The home team, if your runner is a 17 and an 18's rolled, you're thrown out, just like the away team. So it's only affecting the 18s or 19s. Again, I hope it looks like, and I want it to seem like I'm making subtleties here. It's just very small changes to the basic Strat-O-Matic rules. Now this one, infield up with the bases loaded, this is the one that I've really had the hardest time with and changed and adopted, and then I changed it back and then adopted, and right now this is how I plan on proceeding in the past year and moving forward. So here are how I do this. The infield is up and the bases are loaded with 0 or 1 out. If it's a GBA, your home team gets the GBA. The way I play it is the defensive team, ball gets kind of stuck in his glove a little bit. They get the guy out at the plate, but they can't double him up. They can't get the guy at first. You're going to say probably offhand that that's unfair to the away team. But one thing I do like about it is it prevents a run from scoring. So that was important of making a discernation here between how to play a GBA between the away and home team. So it's a disadvantage to the away team. But the GBC and ground ball B and C rules, I play, if you bring the infield up, you get the guy out at the plate. Now a GBC would seem to mean that the player has juggled the ball and can't make a play at the guy running in to the plate and has to throw the ball to first. But I'm playing that as GBB for both, and actually you could say it gives an advantage to the away team, right? Because you could play this as the away team, that runner scored, but now I'm saying no, he gets them out at the plate anyway. So it kind of, if you want to look at it this way, it kind of, if this is too much of a home field advantage, this gives the away team a little more advantage in that they got the same rules for both. And this is one of the most, because it's such an impactful rule, this is a very important rule in the innings of a game, that I always hate if this ultimately decides a game. This choice of whether or not to implement a home field advantage like this and not just go with the standard rules of how to do this. But I decided, because again, everybody gets to be away and everybody gets to be home, I'm just going to stick with a set of rules. And it's, once you start adopting rules and you start playing many games, and I'll play 1,000 games a year using these rules, the game plays so fast and it's not a big deal. And the final rule involves defense that I simply call a defense double jeopardy. I'm gonna have to do that by going into the game play and giving you an example. So defensive double jeopardy is a home field advantage when they're batting and when they're also in the field. Let's create a top of the first inning, and there's 1 out, there's a guy at first, and the batter, Ray Knight, is going to hit a ground ball to second base. All right, second base, Rob Wilfong is a 2E21. Excuse me, Rob Wilfong's defense, let me write it up right here, just so we can use this example. He's a 2E20, second baseman. Okay, so when I go over to the result box, from top to bottom, this is input information. But every time you put a result in, everything gets a recalculation. So it's always going to these are your input constants, but you're always going to get a recalculation every time you put any sort of number or any sort of record carriage return, and you're going to get a recalculation, right? And this is something that I discovered when I made my spreadsheet. So I didn't want to do this rule. I discovered this rule by using Excel to make this program, that I could utilize this program as an advantage. So it was kind of an accident that I discovered that I could come up with a double jeopardy. So in this case, let me go through the scenario. You've got a 2E20 second baseman, and if you go over here, position 4 is for second base, fielding rating is 2, and E rating is set to 21. Now, under this result, the single is only a product of fielding rating, which is 2, and Wilfong is a 2. There's no advantage. This would be a single. It wouldn't be anything other than that. Now, let us assume, let's get to this situation. Let's say that the result up there was this, 3E21. I'm going to hit recalculate and see if I can get a single to come up again. So if this were to come up in the game, a second baseman who's a 3E21, the result is single ... The home team pipes up and says, Rob Wilfong is not a 3, he's a 2. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to put the 2 in. And then the result is GBA for an E21 second baseman. Well, Wilfong is an E20 second baseman, so that's actually better than that. It's an if then else. If an E21 makes a double play and my guy is an E20, then it's a double play. But however, the parenthesis, by the way, I might make this more clear, the result as a parenthesis means that the E rating came up with that instead of the fielding rating. I'm going to change the result again. All right, so you see this GBB? This ground ball B is a direct reflection of his 2 fielding rating. Let me hit F9 again. GBA, fielding rating. Single dot, fielding rating, GBA. The parenthesis means it's set for the E rating. So this says he's a 2E14 second baseman, creates a double play. The away team says, but wait a minute, Wilfong's an E20. He's not that good. So you'd have to then plug in the proper result, 20. And then that calculation is it. So the shorthand is that a lot of times, let's say it was set to right field at, let's say it was set to a right fielder who was a 3E16. And the E16 is going to make a lot of errors for a right fielder, right? Singles and error, single, okay. So the first thing I would do when an E rating for Wilfong comes up is I'd go over to position and I would type in 4 because he's a second baseman. Now, after doing that, it says that a 3E16 second baseman creates a GBC. I'm Rob Wilfong. My range is better. My E rating's better as well. It doesn't matter because this is a fielding rating. You're out. I don't need to plug in the 2E20. I can stop now, put the out in, and keep my game going. I don't have to take the extra step of putting in his proper fielding rating and putting in his proper E rating. And so this will quicken up the game and will also give the home field an advantage because if you got to a 3E24, let's say use that example, and let's say this came up. So a second baseman who's a 3E24, an error comes up, and you could say, hey, wait a minute, Wilfong's better than that. That's not fair to the home team. So let's plug in the 2, and you get an out. But let's say error came up, and then you go, well, let me plug in the next one. Oops. So the home team can use this input to get to the proper defense for his player, and of course, eventually it's still not going to work. He's still going to give up a single or an error as a 2E20. But the point is that you would use the minimum number of keystrokes here to get a result that is fair. That's the idea. It's fair to the overall defense of the player. In other words, you would never take a 1 and you would never take like an E16, right? You can never take this result. He's not that good. So you don't get that GPA in that instance. And of course, the result is the same when you're at bat. So now the Phillies, the home team in this case, are at bat. Leadoff guy singles, and there's a ball hit to right fielder Joel Youngblood, and Youngblood is a 2E11 in right field. So the right fielder, you plug that in there, it's going to say false. You know, that's the out. That's the proper way of doing it. But let's say you're in the middle of this game, okay? You're in the middle of this game. It's set up to shortstop who was a 348, right? So you hit the ball to Youngblood, who's a 2 in right field. So you got to make the position proper. You always have to make that proper. So you got to put his position in there. Now, this is where the home field can't do this. This is a single dot off a right fielder who would have a fielding rating of 3. This would be, you would call cheating this, because Youngblood is not a 3, he's a 2. So you don't get this, Phillies. You have to at least go to the next step and put his 2 in here. Now, this could be an out if this game was in Shea Stadium. We'd be done with this, because the Mets would say, that's a 2 out, but we're in Philadelphia, so Phillies demand we complete the result by putting in all the proper numbers, 9, 2, and 11. And now it's an out. So the idea is when you're at the plate, you're always going to want to put your defensive team, your opponent's full position, field, and E rating in to get a result that you like. That's the home field advantage when you're at the plate. When you're in the field, you can take the short steps, the shortcuts that we did with the Rob Wilfong example. And this creates a defensive advantage for the home team, whether they're in the field or they're at the plate. And again, the beauty of this is that it makes defense even more important than it would for the conventional rules. And it also means that when these rosters are constructed, defense is a priority for all the 32 teams. And it also means that on this bench for the Mets, Jerry Remy is a good second baseman defensively, Beal is a good first baseman defensively, and Mullinex. So in this particular example, the Mets should probably think of either starting these guys in more road games to get their good defense out there, or to make their substitutions pretty soon to help their team win defensively. Why they would be on the bench now? They'd be going against a lefty Carlton in this particular case. And the Phillies, they actually have some good defensive players on the bench. They have Gary Maddox, a Gold Glove center fielder, on the bench, and Lonnie Smith is playing center field at home. So if there was going to be a balance of home and away, Smith is more likely to be out in the field at home than he is on the road. And Maddox is most definitely going to be in center field as much as possible in road games. It's too valuable having a great Gold Glove center fielder for a road team. Same with Larry Bow at short. He'll never miss a road game for that kind of reason. So that is I'll wrap it up with that. That's how I treat home field advantage. And I think the biggest point to make is that it's not that I'm playing all this by myself in my own league. If I was playing opponents, if I was playing any of you folks, a discussion of what rules to maybe use and what rules to maybe not use might make the overall gameplay more interesting. And maybe not do any of these at all. To throw them all away, play by the straight strat rules, or maybe experiment and say, why don't we try this E0 for pitchers? Because that seems like it's such a minimalist thing. It's not going to affect a lot, and it speeds the game up really quick. You know, you instantly know you got a GBA there, for instance. All right, thank you for checking the home field advantage video out. We'll see you next time.